Maptitude, you're presented with a quick start, and the quick start contains the most frequently used options which facilitate easy map creation. For this exercise, I'm going to use the Create a New Map option in the quick start and click OK. When choosing this option, the Create a Map wizard appears, and here I will choose to create a general purpose map. I'm going to create a general purpose map of a city, that city being Boston, Massachusetts, and I'll click Next. Nothing else is required, so I will click Finish. Maptitude creates a map of the requested area, in this case Boston, Massachusetts. So in this case, I have a couple of different things that I want to accomplish. One of the things that I want to accomplish is I want to be able to add in some locations that are specific to my interests, and I want to make those locations appear as a layer on the map. I don't have a spreadsheet, I don't have anything like that detailing where these locations are, but I know visually by looking on the map. I also want to perform some analysis within specified distances of these locations, and I can do all of this using the Click Bands Toolbox. The Click Bands Toolbox is located under the Tools menu, and then under Geographic Analysis as Click Bands Toolbox. Selecting that command opens the toolbox near the center of the screen. I'm going to begin by drawing some temporary points on the map at locations that I have previously defined as areas of interest. One of these happens to be in Bentley University, so I'm going to go ahead and select that. Another of these locations is in Plymouth, Massachusetts. And it's in this area near this particular golf club and tee stop. I'm going to click in another point. And my third location of interest is near the Stony Brook State Reservation. Where I'll put my last point. So I have now identified 3 points of interest, one in Bentley University, one near the golf course in Plymouth, and the third at the Stony Brook State Reservation. In addition to identifying these points and turning them into a layer, I would like to conduct some analysis on these points. Specifically, I'd like to get information about the demographics within specified distances of each location. To do that, I will use the Create Bands tool in the Click Bands Toolbox. When choosing this tool, I'm prompted if I want to save the points I've created to a layer or not. If I don't save them to a layer, they will be temporary to this map and will be deleted. So I do want to save these points to a layer. I'm going to click Yes. And I'm going to browse to the location where I want to save this new layer, which will contain anywhere from 4 to 16 files, depending upon the file type Maptitude is creating. I'm going to name this new layer My Locations and click Save. Maptitude has added the layer of My Locations to the Display Manager on the left side of the screen, and then opens the Bands toolbox. Bands are circular rings around any point, line, or area, and bands can be drawn using any one of 4 methods available in Maptitude. The first method, Fix Sizes, allows me to enter any number of distance ranges in the size type box. I can separate these sizes either with a space or with a comma. I can also choose to create these bands at evenly spaced intervals, starting from one distance to another distance by a specified interval. I can create bands at fixed sizes if I have this information based upon some data field in the layer around which the bands are being created. I don't have that in this case since I just created the layer. I can also have bands created at sizes appropriate to the data that they're surrounding. So if I wanted to create bands that were surrounding, say, 100,000 people, then I could enter that value, specify the layer and the field which I'm referencing, and each band would be sized so that it encompasses the target value. In my case, I'm going to use a simple example of creating these circular areas at fixed distances. And I'm going to create those at distances of 1, 3, and 5 miles. The units are selectable in the drop-down. I don't have names in my point layer. If I did, I could choose the field which contained those names. If I were to click OK at this point, the circles that are outlining the distances that I entered, 1, 3, and 5 miles, would appear on the map without any demographics. I do, however, want to get information about the population and other fields within the specified thresholds from each of my points. So to do this, I'm going to click the Overlay tab and check Compute Overlay. That's all I need to do here. So I'm going to click OK and enter a name for my new geographic file. Maptitude uses the settings in the dialog as I fill them out to create 3 distance thresholds around each point. By default, these circular distances appear in a light green. You can't see them very well right now, so I'm going to click on the style icon for that layer, change the color and the width to something that stands out a little bit more on this map so that it's more visible as I'm talking about it. So these bands are drawing on the map in this kind of raspberry color surrounding each of the points for my locations, which I can also change an icon for to make more visible if I choose to do that. So they stand out a bit more now. So for each of these bands, I'm able to get information about the underlying demographics that are encompassed in each area. I can get this information one at a time using the Info tool located in the Tools toolbox. I should point out, however, that the Info tool is tied to the working layer. That would be the layer that's displaying in bold in the Display Manager. Also appears in the working layer drop-down at the top of the Maptitude screen. To change that working layer, I can either select it from this list, or I can right-click on the layer in the Display Manager and choose Make Working Layer. Once I have made my bands layer the working layer, using the Info tool, I can obtain information on each of these circles. So I can see for each area what the median household income is, for example, the population, so on and so forth. I can also obtain the information all in one view by right-clicking on the layer and choosing New Data View. So in this case, for my point 1, 2, and 3, I can see at my 5-mile interval, my 3-mile interval, and my 1-mile interval each of the population values and values of other demographic fields as they were collected by the software. So that's one use of this Click Bands Toolbox, is to identify points on the map which can optionally be saved as a layer, as I did, and then create a ring analysis around those points. There are other uses for the Click Bands Toolbox. Before going on to show you those, I'm just going to hide each of the new layers I created. So we're starting with a map similar to, actually just the same as what we started with initially. The Add Temporary Lines tool will allow you to create lines So if you have certain delivery routes, for example, that you know you want to use, you could click those in using the tools. You can change the styles of those lines by using the Style tool. So if I want these to stand out more before I do further analysis, I can change the settings here. Now from this point, I don't actually have to do any analysis. I can simply save these annotations as a layer. So this is a nice way to quickly create a layer in Maptitude just by clicking on the map. There are also buttons here to undo the changes that I've made. So in this case, if I clicked undo, this particular feature would be removed, and it is. I can also redo my edits, clicking the redo button. I can clear all of the annotations, clicking the cancel button. In the Click Bands Toolbox and in any layered toolbox in Maptitude, you can create only lines or points or areas in one layer. Each is mutually exclusive. So if I wanted to now conduct analysis on these lines that I've drawn, I can do so again by clicking Create Bands. I'll save my lines to a layer and get this Click Bands, or the Bands Toolbox again. This time I am going to build to a value. And I want to build these bands so that each encloses a population of 50,000 people. And I will overlay those as well. So having entered those settings, each of these bands are created. I can give them a solid fill if I want them to stand out a little bit more. So I can see the area encompassed, or the area required in order to encompass 50,000 people around each line. And it's very clear in this particular example that those areas are much larger depending upon population density, the distribution of the data being used for the overlay. So that's another way that this Click Bands Toolbox can be used. I use the Info tool on this new bands layer I created. I can see right away that the population is as close to 50,000 as possible for each of these areas. I'm going to go ahead and hide these two layers and show you a third application of this Click Bands Toolbox, and then I'll move on to taking questions. The last tool, which we haven't yet discussed, is the Add Temporary Areas tool. This will allow you to define your own areas simply by clicking on the map, double-clicking to close. I'm going to, again, change the style of this layer so that it stands out a little bit more. It's a little bit more visible on this map. And I'm going to create a second area, which joins the first. I want to draw a little bit inside. The extra space will disappear. And I'm going to right-click to go back, remove those shape points. So click in my area as I want it. Again, double-click to close. And this time, as I create my bands, I want to create a band of fixed size. It's actually at 0 miles. But I want to overlay. Basically what I'm doing here is I'm trying to obtain some demographic information for each of those areas which I drew. And I want those demographics to match the boundaries of the areas exactly. So setting the band size as 0 will make the bands match exactly with the boundaries for those areas I drew, and then I will overlay in order to obtain information. The result is shown in this map, and what I have here is I have two layers which are essentially duplicates of each other, my areas and my area bands. I really could have just left my areas out. I didn't even need to save that as a layer. I'm just going to remove that because it's kind of redundant now. And I have my areas bands now, which I can change the border of so these two areas appear to be more distinct. And the bands are actually ended up being one band around the entire area for which I can get information. And what I did here is I forgot to change my working layer, so it's American landmass, which is not what I wanted. I go ahead and close this info box and make my areas band the working layer and use that info tool again in order to see what the demographics are for this particular area. Were I to repeat this process, I'm going to show you the difference here. I draw in my areas again. This time when I do bands, if I don't save my areas to a layer because I don't want this duplication, I can say no. I still want to create these bands at 0 miles, but if I create them as separate bands, then I'll get that overlap, and I can do my overlay. So the difference between this shot of doing this and the last one is that the bands that are drawn are different in that they actually retained the overlapping areas. I'm just going to fill these in so that they're a little more visible. So these lines are retained, and I look at the data view. I actually have 3 distinct areas. I have area 1 that I drew, area 2, and then the overlap between the 2 as area 3. So what I'll do now is I'm going to go on to taking any questions that you have and see where we can go from there. The first question is, can you create bands with your own set of data? So if you have a list of zip codes, for example, and you want to create bands for those layers, for those zip codes that you have already used the Create a Map Wizard to map, then you can do so using the standard bands tool. There are videos for that on our website. This webinar is really geared towards the Click Bands Toolbox itself. In order to, I'll just give you a quick demonstration, and then we'll go on to any other questions. If you have your own standard bands, you can create a map of your own data by identifying whatever data set you want to use and mapping data using any method that is appropriate for your data set. In the Create a Map Wizard, there is an option under Analysis to create bands, and you can create those bands at fixed sizes. Again, if we wanted to do 1, 3, and 5 miles, this could be entered there with an overlay and saved. And the resulting map will include those bands as a part of the map itself. If you've already created a map using the Create a Map Wizard, we actually have quite a large data set here, so let's see, it's pretty quick, good. So these are the resulting bands. Alternately, if you just have the points and you want to create bands, you can do so by making your point layer the working layer, then choosing Geographic Analysis and choosing bands and entering the settings as desired. Again, 1, 3 and 5 miles, computing the overlay. And I just run through this again. I picked the wrong thing. I wanted to use all features. So now that I have the settings correct, then we're going to get the same output. Be happy to address any additional questions at this time. In absence of any additional questions, I do want to thank you for attending today's webinar. We do have additional webinars scheduled in the coming weeks, including an intermediate Maptitude webinar tomorrow, September 25th, as well as introductory Maptitude, Click Bands, and advanced geocoding webinars in the upcoming weeks. We welcome your feedback and ask that you complete the survey at the end of this webinar to let us know how we're doing and if there are any additional topics which you would like to see. Thank you for attending this webinar and have a nice day. Bye-bye.